You're listening to WRUU LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
And good morning, this is Wayne. I do appreciate you tuning in today to Savannah Lexicon here on WRUU LP. I do appreciate it. My guest this morning is Ron Christopher, who returned to Savannah. He's a Savannah native, returned to Savannah after many years in investment banking and corporate law in New York. He has found himself drawn, if you will, to some particular issues of social cultural issues here in Savannah, and was, for instance, one of the prime movers regarding the Span the Gap event that was held regarding the naming of the Talmadge Bridge. That was a public forum event that occurred, and actually had Ron on my show at that time, and glad to have him back. Let me tell you first off, though, that I have to take care of a little business before we get going, and that being the general disclaimer. The viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. All right, so how you doing, Ron? Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well, Wayne. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning. All right, so just a little context. And again, excuse me, everyone. I do have a little cold, and I'm a little rough here with my voice, but hopefully I'll get through it, and you will too. I'll do my very best not to cough directly into your ear. All right, I make that pledge. Speaking of pledges, which we have coming on today, but all right. So the issue is the Civil War Memorial. And I had a show Tuesday, for those of you who hopefully listened, an interesting discussion on Tuesday with Dr. Anthony DiLorenzo from Savannah State University on this very same issue, and he gave us some great historical perspective and kind of a social perspective as well. And Ron, you have your own perspective on this, obviously, and you have already expressed it, actually, in print. I think you had a column in Connect Savannah, and you also wrote an editorial piece, I think, in the Savannah Morning News, correct?
That's correct.
That also, about the Talmadge Bridge, but also specifically about the Confederate Memorial. So, why don't we just start with this? If you can just sort of encapsulate in a general sense, and then we'll talk it out and we'll discuss it a little bit, but just give us your general, overall, encapsulated, in a nutshell kind of idea about the Confederate Memorial here in Savannah.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. At one level, right, this is a very kind of complex, nuanced issue.
Right.
It touches a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And most people bring a certain level of emotion to the issue.
True.
So that in and of itself, since we're dealing with society, we're dealing with people, that in and of itself makes it complex.
Indeed.
But when I step back from it,
mm-hmm.
right, and think about the historical context, and I think about, the impact that these memorials logically or tend to have
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in terms of their effect on society,
right?
It becomes a much simpler issue for me.
Okay.
I don't think anywhere in history, whether in America or any other country, we memorialize entities or persons or groups who have actually declared themselves enemy of the state and literally taken up arms to, either destroy or succeed or just change the nature of the state, the integrity of the state. Okay. And I think that's what we have when we talk about Confederate memorials. So if you look at it clinically like that way, right, it's like the answer kind of presents itself. Yeah. It is, in fact, part of history.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, it can never be erased. And there should be evidence of history. The question, I think, for the public is in what context, in what place. And here you're talking about public spaces where normally we want to honor something. So in that sense, I don't think it's appropriate to have it in public spaces.
Okay. All right, excellent. And boy, your statement both hits on, in some sense, the simplicity of it. On the other hand, very much also the complexity, as you say, because it is an issue that's various people have various ideas about, and you touch on several that we'll touch. And I'll also say that as I'm talking about this, I will, in some cases, sort of play devil's advocate in the sense of trying to tease out further, enunciation regarding certain issues. You talk about, because you bring up one of them, the idea that we erase history. And I have a feeling for that. I mean, because that is something that worries me just in a general sense when I think about that scenario. I think, well, no, that's not something that a society wants to do. However, you make the very valid point, I think, that it's kind of there's no way we're going to erase history. The history is in the history books. Number one, it's perfectly legitimate in my sense of things to have it in the history museums. That is a public space, but to me that is a very special space that should pay absolute allegiance to literal history. We also have historical context or historical elements often in cemeteries. That, to me, if it's kind of appropriate, I think is not an inappropriate place, perhaps, at least and this is an issue that can be talked about, is whether or not anything regarding, say, the Civil War is appropriate in a cemetery. So let's just touch on that real quick, and we'll come back and circle around and talk about various things. But what about that? What do you think about a memorial to the dead of all wars, including the Civil War? Do you think that's legitimate or no?
I do.
Okay.
And actually, you made two good points. One, certain museums are public spaces. I would also think that would be appropriate place for these types of memorials.
Okay.
But in particular, when it comes to cemeteries, I absolutely think it's appropriate.
Okay.
The Confederate dead, just as the Union dead, and bystanders, neutrals, they all deserve, proper burial, proper recognition.
Okay.
For the things that they stood for.
Okay.
So I wouldn't oppose having such a memorial in a cemetery, whether public or private.
Right. Okay. So we've made a couple of nuances there already in that, okay, public space in general, no, for some place like Forsyth Park you think is inappropriate. However, we do, it seems, agree that history museums are certainly an appropriate place for whatever historical reality occurred, and cemeteries. So two other public places where we think it's okay, and I think that there are a lot of people who would be in agreement with us there, although I'm quite sure there are some who would disagree even with that.
Oh, sure.
But nevertheless, anyway, we're in agreement there. And we also, in the same context, I guess, we understand is the idea that there's a difference between that and something like Forsyth Park.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, clearly that memorial was designed to honor the Confederate soldier. And again, I've pointed out how kind of incongruent that is with, the normal approach. I kind of see it as somewhat equivalent to, if you were in Germany and you saw a memorial memorializing the Nazi soldier.
Right. And you don't, from my understanding.
You don't. Now it's a different country, and people say, well, they have different rules about freedom of speech and expression and those sorts of things. But I think kind of across the globe, really, you'd be hard-pressed to find a place where the society is kind of honoring people who were opposed to the society as opposed to representing the positive values of that society.
And this gets to kind of what one might say the root of the issue. I guess there are various roots and branches to the issue, and it's an ugly truth, and it's something that I think Southerners, and for the record, excuse me, for the record, I am a white male, born and raised in the South, here in Georgia, and those kinds of distinctions, by the way, and you're African American.
I am.
Now, those kinds of distinctions I would never bring out in a normal discussion. It's totally immaterial to a discussion. But with a discussion of this, I don't know. I think perhaps it's worth noting that kind of thing. But even as a male born in the South, white male born and raised in the South, and somebody proud in general of Southern heritage, we really need to, those of us who haven't at least, and actually I don't include myself in this exactly, but we need to really take a step back and take a look. We sort of just accepted this whole Civil War thing and as being understandable, as being somehow even maybe admirable in some way. As an expression of Southern heritage, we really need to double back and think of that again and take a good hard look at it. And I think that this issue is forcing many people to do that, perhaps.
Yeah, I two things I'd say to that. One, I think it's always good to think and continue to think about decisions that we make along the way or that generations before us made, and it's legitimate to make adjustments where
absolutely.
Our understanding evolves to a certain point.
Yes.
Now that raises a question that at one point I had no appreciation for, but I actually have appreciation for now, and that's the question of slippery slope.
Yes, right.
People say, well, where does it stop? I never understood it. I think I do now. I'll come back to that one. The other thing I'd say is I think that all of us, and certainly in the South, and I know in Savannah, we've been subjected, if you will, to a certain level of propaganda. When it comes to history. Yeah, sure. Right?
In a romanticizing
way. And it's not uncommon, by the way, just, if you look at other countries, everybody.
And we do it for the nation at large.
Yeah, for the nation at large. We tend to glorify, we don't look at the things that are not so pretty, or we glossy them up a little bit so that they're more palatable. Exactly. So we've all, been subject to that. Yep. And I think that when these conflicts come about and you have this huge division, right, a lot of it is attributable to the fact that, we've kind of treated history, in that fashion in the past. And what people have taken for history has really been a form of propaganda,
It is. Yeah. It is. In the literal sense of the word, it is. Yeah. That is what it is. And again, every nation does it. It's not that we're the only ones or anything like that, but every nation does it. And it's true. And we do as we become adults and we become more mature and we have a better, deeper perspective. We really do need to question that, just as we need to question, everything, people. Everything. Everything needs to be questioned.
And by the way, there are great benefits to be had by doing that. I mean, really,
by questioning.
By questioning.
Yes, absolutely,
right?
of course.
And coming to, a largely agreed understanding of facts, things that actually, happen. Yeah. America right now is very diverse country, becoming increasingly diverse. Yeah. You're going to get a lot of different perspectives, whatever area of history you're talking about. So really the one kind of viable place that we can kind of coalesce is around the facts. Yeah. And let's just talk about the ones that we think, we're proud of and that aggrandize us, as well as the ones that we're not so proud of, so that we can kind of move past them and at least we don't have this this tension that comes from having all these different notions of history and what deserves to be glorified.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. It's we and this is one of those where we just sort of take this kind of thing for granted. Okay, we're going to need to take a brief pause for the cause here, folks, but hang in with us. Ron and I are just getting started on this discussion, and we will be right back. You're listening to Savannah Lexicon. WRUU provides Savannah with lots of great programming and a unique service to our listeners. You won't find another radio station in Savannah with the diversity of programming that WRUU offers, both in terms of music and talk programming. And just like our programming is unique, so is the way we pay for it. We're an all-volunteer staff. The voices you hear on WRUU are those of passionate locals who invest their own time to bring you these unique and diverse programs. We only ask that those who listen to WRUU contribute to help the station grow. Go online right now to pledge your support for Savannah's only community radio station. Find the giving links at wruu.org.
When you go to wruu.org, make a one-time contribution of $60 or a monthly donation of $5 per month. It's easy, quick, and affordable. A donation at any level will make you eligible to receive a WRUU bumper sticker, so that you can show the world on wheels that you support Savannah's only community radio station. Become a serious fan at the $107.50 level or above, and we'll ask you if you'd like a WRUU tote bag, a handy gift that goes with you anywhere you need the help, at the grocery store, at the beach, or around the house. Of our appreciation. The real thanks that you get is the satisfaction of knowing that you make possible the diverse, vibrant, exciting, and truly engaging music and news programs you enjoy every day. Go to wruu.org and make a $60 donation. Make a $107.50 donation, or make up your own amount with our great thanks.
You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
And we're back. This is Wayne. It's Savannah Lexicon, and we do appreciate your listening. My guest is Ron Christopher. We are talking about the Confederate Memorial scenario, and just to quickly remind you, the city is seeking input from its residents on this particular matter. You can give your input via email, online survey concerning the future of the Confederate Monument. Survey is accessible at savannahga.gov/Confederate Memorial. That's going to be available only till the 13th, so there's not much more time, all right? It's if you want to get your 2 cents in worth, it would need to be by that time. Email can be sent to confederatememorial@savannahga.gov. You can even do the old-fashioned way and mail comments that can be sent to City of Savannah, Confederate Memorial Task Force, P.O. Box 1027, Savannah, Georgia 31402. Ron and I are talking about this particular instance. And, okay, so we've established a couple of public spaces, at least, that we think it's reasonable, you and I at least, to have whatever kind of, more or less whatever kind of historical memorial or monument and information is there. We've also recognized that this is a kind of for some people, a very late wake-up call to kind of, wait a minute, stop and think about that whole scenario and the legitimacy of it or lack thereof. And you've made that point, Ron, too, that, hey, we should really stop and think about what it is we're sort of glorifying or at least normalizing, if nothing else, in this kind of memorialization of Confederate soldiers. So that's obviously an issue, too. We've also, of course, indicated that, and I'm paraphrasing here and going back and trying to encapsulate what we've kind of touched on already real briefly. So if you disagree with any of this, by all means, touch base and step in with it. But we did talk about how really the idea that we're going to erase history in this is just kind of absurd. We have history books that are taught in schools and of all kinds, depending on the age level that is there. So the story is there. We have all sorts of books written by learned historians about the Civil War. It's always going to be there. Nobody's taking that away. We've also got these museums and other history, the battlefield, national parks of battlefields and museums. So if you get rid of any memorial in any particular city or something like that, it's not as if it's some whole-scale Brillo pad erasure of history. So that's kind of an absurd notion. Now, you did bring up, and maybe we can touch on this real quick, this idea of the slippery slope.
Yeah, that's an interesting one for me. I first heard that in response to the idea that we should rename the Talmadge Bridge.
Right, and you were very much involved in that whole process.
I was, and I learned a lot, and hopefully I elucidated a lot for some people.
Yes.
But and then I started hearing the question of slippery slope when it comes to the Confederate Memorial.
And let me just interject real quick. The whole Talmadge Bridge thing being another idea where we sort of need to, all of a sudden sort of started to wake up. Wait a minute. This thing has got this horrible name associated with this horrible racist. So again, another situation like that. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I tended, and I tend to still look at both situations as being, almost the same, practically, identical. Mm-hmm. And I got this response, and I first interpreted it as an excuse as to not make necessary changes.
And in some cases it probably was, but nevertheless, that doesn't mean it didn't have some. Yeah.
So when I look at it like that, I just totally dismissed it because we should never stop making progress.
Right.
However, I dug kind of behind to try to understand what people who I thought were, had goodwill.
And good for you for doing that.
To understand, like, what do you actually mean by, there's a danger of like the slippery slope. Mm-hmm. And what I was able to find is that those people, what they mean is, we don't know what the criteria is for making the change. Mm-hmm. It just seems random and reckless if we don't have a largely agreed upon criteria for kind of addressing the space. For example, people talk about Thomas Jefferson, the fact that he was a slave owner and probably had some illegitimate children from one of his slaves, and people talk about George Washington, all the people that we've been all raised to honor and revere, right?
And rightfully so in many ways.
And rightfully so. These were excellent, stellar, individuals that contributed greatly to, the great country that we are today.
Right.
So there's a distinction that needs to be made, and people kind of need to understand it in order to get away from, this fear of the slippery slope.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my own, and by the way, people will vary on what they think that criteria should be.
Oh, sure.
I definitely don't think it should be the question of whether or not you own slaves.
Yeah. we would have to wipe away the entire
yeah,
founding of America and
most of America, the founding, and a lot of the aftermath as well.
And of course, going back even to Native Americans.
Yes.
And the fact that we took the whole idea of America, if we did that.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
And we can't do that. It wouldn't be fair at all to our history.
Yeah.
To do that. The distinction, I'd make from, people like Thomas Jefferson, who gave us the Declaration, of Independence, that great statement, that still paying benefits to this day, not just in this country, but around the world.
True.
Is that, he is known for principles such as that, and that he gifted that essentially to the country. Yeah. Was he a flawed individual? Of course he was.
And that's part of what we need to understand and accept is that these people were not demigods on a pedestal. Okay, they were human beings.
They were human beings, and by the way, that kind of touches on what I said earlier about all of us kind of having been subjected to some propaganda.
Yeah,
for a period of time.
Exactly.
So, to the extent we get the true history, we have the opportunity to appreciate the nuance, in life events.
And of course, all of this has much to do with education.
Education, yes. Some people might say, well, you're copping out, you're giving excuses for, this individual. But the reality is, if you look closely enough at history, you find that most of people that we honor as heroes have been flawed. I mean, recently, there's some news, some people call it a smear, that's come out about some of the civil rights leaders. I, for one, don't think that true or not, the kind of negative statements that are made takes away from the positive contributions that they have, because that is not what they stood for. What they stood for are those endearing values that kind of move the country forward into a better place. And they've kind of been the beacon of light, in times of darkness.
Right.
In fact, I like what I just said. A beacon of light in a time of darkness.
Yep.
Even during, the Civil War, the height of the Civil War, there were people who were Confederates. If we look at their experience in the history, right, we would recognize that during that time, there were beacons of light in a time when it was tough to be that beacon of light. Unfortunately, right, we don't honor them. We don't have memorials and statues for General Gant, for example, who was a brigadier general who started out on the Confederate side, and his conscience essentially led him to defect from the Confederacy, move north, and spend the rest of his life kind of advocating the cause of freedom,
right,
and equality, pointing out how ridiculous it was to be claiming to fight a war for freedom when you're looking to enslave other people. So, people like that. He was a slave owner earlier.
Yeah.
And he changed his life in such a way that now, to the extent he's known at all, he's known as a guy who kind of went against the trend and all of his upbringing to stand for values that today we would certainly appreciate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and let's get to this real quick because we do want to put some alternatives or some other ideas out there. So you're essentially, number one, I'm assuming you favor the local input into it that the city is doing. I mean,
well, I have some concerns about that. One of the things the mayor said about the renaming of the Talmadge Bridge is that he was, of course, interested in understanding, the thoughts and feelings of the public. However, he recognized that whether to rename the bridge or not was not something that we did based on majority vote.
Right.
That it was simply the right thing to do, and it ought to be done. And in in reaching out to the public, he was seeking to kind of understand, the nuance and the depth of feelings out there.
Okay.
To the extent that it might inform what we might name the bridge.
Right.
I thought that made perfect sense.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's what leaders and statesmen do on these types of issues. I see the Confederate Memorial issue being that same type issue, but only, in spades, so to speak. I mean, it is even more of an issue or question that calls for statesmanship and leadership and courage to kind of do the right thing, even though you may have a majority that don't appreciate it and understand it at this day and time. I have no doubt that history is marching toward a world where there's greater appreciation, sensitivity, and understanding amongst people of different ethnic backgrounds or races and all of this. And the strong leaders and the strong statesmen are those that kind of move us toward that.
Right.
Sometimes before all of us are ready to get there.
It's kicking and screaming, some of us.
Some of us.
Yes. Okay. Well, all right. At any rate, they are getting some input from the public. And I guess what I wanted to do is this. You feel like, I think, that you've stated that you essentially think that it should definitely be removed from Forsyth Park. Is that correct?
I do.
Okay.
I do. And I actually think that for Savannah as a city, taking that step would actually move us closer to being the city that we purport to be and want to be.
Okay. Do you think it should be destroyed, or do you think it would be okay if it was moved to, let's say, a cemetery, as we spoke of earlier?
Oh, it absolutely should not be destroyed.
Okay.
It's a historical statement in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good.
So it definitely needs to be, seen. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be understood and put into the proper context. Just as moving it and putting it, say, into a museum or into a cemetery would be a part of history that ought to be explained and talked about and all of that.
Okay. All right. and so, all right, good. Well, I'll tell you what, before I've got some reaction to that as well, but we do need to take a quick break, so I'll hold it until we come back.
This portion of WRUU-LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by a grant from Brighter Day Natural Foods, offering produce, vitamins, and supplements, and a deli and juice bar. Brighter Day is located at 1102 Bull Street at the south end of Forsyth Park. More information available at 912-236-4703 or brighterdayfoods.com.
WRUU is all volunteer community radio. We are proud to have more than 40 program hosts bringing you the most local, most passionate, and most unexpected programs on your radio dial. It might not always be slick, but it comes with heart. WRUU brings you a wide range of music programs, from classical to jazz and punk to electronica. You won't hear this kind of music variety anywhere else. We also bring you local talk programs that no other station will bring you, like Democracy Now! And Background Briefing. With such a range of programming, you're bound to discover something you like and something you don't, but that's the beauty of community radio, discovery. During our membership campaign, please discover how we pay for community radio. We rely on listeners like you to keep bringing you the programs that you enjoy. Support us with a financial gift today at WRUU.org. Go to WRUU.org and look for the giving links.
When you go to WRUU.org to make your contribution, remember that for an all-volunteer community radio station like ours, a modest donation can make a real difference. Consider making a $10 monthly donation. At $10 per month, your annual contribution will help us to pay for a month of licensing fees for all of the music that you hear on WRUU and WRUU.org. That's right. You can say that you help pay for Savannah's most diverse, most local, and most passionately curated music selection on the airwaves with a very affordable gift to WRUU. And you can make a one-time donation or pay monthly. A $120 one-time gift might be the equivalent of a pair of expensive concert or sports tickets. Now listen, whatever it means to you, it means the world to us because it pays for the music that you enjoy. So please, go to WRUU.org and support your community radio.
This is WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
And we are back. This is Wayne. My guest is is Ron Christopher. We're talking about the Confederate Memorial issue here in Savannah, Georgia. And Ron was just indicating his idea that it should definitely not be destroyed. We're thinking now particularly about the Forsyth Park Monument, that it should not be destroyed. However, it definitely should be removed from Forsyth Park and put into a different context, perhaps cemetery or museum kind of thing, and with some contextual information. Have I kind of caught that pretty much accurately there, Ron?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. And the other thing is this. So we should kind of maybe at least touch on and address the idea that might not happen. And because there are a lot of people who are saying, I say a lot of people, I don't know how many people, there are some people who are indicating that what we should do is put some additional information to contextualize it in some way at Forsyth Park. Now, the question then becomes, just as a hypothetical, but perhaps worthwhile, because it could be how it develops. I don't know. But as a hypothetical as to what that context should be, would you have, even though you do not think that should be the way that it goes, Ron, but would you have some sense of what sort of context might be meaningful?
I really don't.
Okay.
And that's
fair enough, because that's not where your head's at on the whole
it's
issue.
not. I mean, I attended the city council meeting some time ago where the mayor first announced that he and the rest of the council were in favor of renaming the Talmadge Bridge. And he used that opportunity to talk a little bit about the Confederate Soldier Memorial at Forsyth Park.
Right.
And he suggested, and I say suggested because it was not at all explicit. In fact, he brought in a local historian, African American, who shared a little bit of the background on how the monument was built and
Right.
and also shared some stories that were unrelated to the memorial per se. One of the stories that kind of alarmed me, at least it was puzzling to me, concerned a enslaved person named Frank Stiles here in Savannah, who happened to be a loyal slave, or at least he's presented in history as a very loyal slave. And he went to one of the battlefronts with his master. I forgot his name. His last name was Stiles, so he had the same last name.
He took the master's name. Yeah.
Yes, and they lost the battle, and his owner was despondent because they lost, and he sought to cheer up his owner by saying something like, "Well, boss, we fought hard, but we lost." And that statement was kind of memorialized in history. And so this was the what was shared at the city council meeting, along with statements that that the war itself kind of impacted Savannahans of all stripes, including some of the enslaved.
Yeah.
So I said it puzzled me and it alarmed me a little bit because I was thinking, surely they're not suggesting that, somehow or another we should tell that story and that would improve on the presence of the memorial.
Right. I know what you're talking about, and I don't know if it's because, did you mention that in one of the pieces you wrote?
I did.
Maybe that's where I came across it, because I was not at the meeting, shameful as that may be to admit. But that does, I do recall that, and I agree with you. That puzzled me too in reading it.
Yeah. I mean, and the irony would be that that type of, there's in the history and in the literature, mythology around the Civil War, there's the mythology of the the happy slave. And,
oh, good
and all
God.
that. So I thought, oh wow, that would just be tragic.
Well,
if they somehow or another incorporate that into this memorial.
Well, no, I agree with you there. That would be now, but there would be some context that would be certainly not that bad. It could be.
I hope so.
It could be anyway.
I personally
but you're right. If that's the right kind of, I mean, if that's the context, you're right. That puzzles me and kind of horrifies me that anybody would be thinking along those lines. But that doesn't mean that somebody isn't thinking along those lines. Here's one thing that occurred to me when I was starting to think about all this in the first place. And I really began to think of it in terms of adding context there at Forsyth Park, just because as I was working step by step through this process of considering things, because this has not been an easy thing, I'll be honest, to necessarily decide on myself, because of my background, and because I do understand the idea of a slippery slope, and I do understand there is some nuance that it comes into play. So it's been something I've been trying to work through very carefully. But at one point I was thinking in terms of adding context to Forsyth Park, and I came up with an idea that I had. But then afterwards it occurred to me, well, you know what? This should be done, period. What I will lay out here in a second should be done anyway, regardless of this issue. And that is this: there should be monuments all over, really, the nation, but I'll say the South at this moment, just because that's where we are, and that's the regional context that we have at the moment. There should be monuments to what African Americans have done to build this nation, to build these cities, to feed the people, to enrich, as it were, unfortunately, the white people, but enrich the society, the culture that they lived in through their agricultural work and their hard labor. Why don't we have monuments to that?
Those are excellent questions.
Yeah.
It would be appropriate, to do that, because the contribution is huge.
Absolutely.
Just numerous historical works have documented the contribution of enslaved people to not just the development of America, but to the entire world.
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
You think of cotton, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Cotton was the first major global industry. It actually fired up the Industrial Revolution, which became the original capitalism that we know about, and not just in terms of goods, but just in terms of techniques and financial instruments and all of that.
Absolutely.
The backbone of all of that were millions of enslaved people.
Sure.
And yes, they should be recognized, but and that obviously is a challenge to make happen, because it hasn't happened yet. But here's another point, right? And perhaps it'll help people kind of understand how far away we are, perhaps, from where we ought to be, and on the individual personal level too. Right? What about monuments and memorials for those enslaved persons who actually rebelled and took up arms.
Another good
to fight against,
point,
their enslavers,
Yes.
who actually
Yes.
took life and said, liberty or death. What about a monument to those people?
That's a good point.
Right.
You're absolutely right too. Yes, those people who refused to, who took the same stance in the military, the courage to stand up there and fight for something that the right side of that whole issue.
Yeah, the things that we as Americans today we take pride in.
True American values.
Yeah,
yes.
and they exhibited it under kind of hopeless odds. They weren't going to win, but the fact is that they exemplified that spirit that we say defines the American character.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
So do we let our particular hue, or our particular upbringing, in the ideas that we develop about history, kind of somehow or another it stops?
Yeah.
At that point.
Wow. Okay. But I think both of our ideas are very good, and there should be some damn statuary going up as we speak, people, all over the nation. Because again, it's one of those things where you I have to admit, you go through life and you don't think about, wait a minute, what's missing? But if it's not there, you can kind of miss it, and all of a sudden things like this happen, and it's like a slap in the face. And you say, wait a minute,
in the face.
Wait a minute, exactly right.
Yeah.
Why don't we have this?
Yeah.
Why don't we have that?
One of the things that struck me around this whole kind of topic is how passionate people are about it. And when I say people, I'm talking about kind of what we consider not the experts or people who are like history buffs and all of that, but the fact that there are people who probably haven't opened a history book since school,
and
high school.
May have barely opened it then.
Barely opened it then, right?
Education.
And somehow, when it comes to this, they care.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm really like struck by that. And so, and when I see stuff like that, right, it just raises questions for me. It's like, okay, why do they care?
Yeah.
Like, why do they care about this, but they don't care about that?
Right.
And very interesting question.
All right, guys, we're going to have to. I hate it. I wish we could talk for another 3 hours, Ron. And again, I may end up, because this issue keeps bubbling up here locally. So, we had the vandals was the most recent thing, the people who vandalized the monuments, the most recent kind of bubbling up, and then the front page headline about the city seeking input on the Confederate Monuments. So the issue keeps bubbling up, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm hoping, as Dr. De Lorenzo suggested last week, actually, that they will extend the comment period beyond this, and also be thinking about having some forums in the manner that we had in Span the Gap. So who knows? There may be more and more shows for this. I'm going to have to break it off for now. I thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Wayne.
And I do appreciate it. Some excellent points, some excellent thought on this matter. Hang with us, folks. As I normally do here on Savannah Lexicon, I'm going to take a brief break and then come back and let you know about some of the important and in some cases just fun things that are going on here in the next week or so. So hang in for that. We'll be right back.
WRUU is unique in Savannah in so many ways. We provide programs that no one else will. News programs like Background Briefing and Democracy Now!, and music programs of the widest and wildest possible styles. We embrace community spirit, and our mission is to provide voice and visibility to advance our values. Community radio with global soul. We have many things that make us unique, but we rely on your uniqueness to keep us going. Only you know how much community radio is worth to you, and we're counting on you to pledge whatever amount you can give to grow community radio WRUU. Go online right now to pledge your support. Find the giving links at wruu.org.
Don't procrastinate in making your contribution at WRUU.org. Our membership campaign will be over before you know it. You don't want this campaign to end without registering your support for Savannah's most diverse, most local, and most unexpected radio station. Consider making a one-time gift of $107.50. That works out to less than $9 per month. That might not sound like much, but it will pay for a month of licensing fees for all the music that you hear on WRUU and online at WRUU.org. Modest donations make a real difference for our station. Any donation that fits your budget is fine with us. We need you now. Go to WRUU.org. Look for the giving links. And thanks for your support of WRUU.
All right, it's Wayne. I'm back, and thank you for listening today. A good show again on Savannah Lexicon. And I want to remind you, following me, a couple of really, really excellent shows that broaden the geographic base of conversation to national and international, that being Background Briefing at 9 o'clock and at 10 o'clock Democracy Now! As you know, Savannah Lexicon is about local community, and that's what this radio station is about. All right, so I just want to let you know also some very good guests coming up on Savannah Lexicon next week on Tuesday. I've got Ryan McMakin, Marketing and Managing Director of the Savannah Music Festival, which will be announcing its lineup actually tonight at an event at Ships of the Seas Museum. There's going to be a lineup announcement at about, I think, 7:30 tonight. Ships of the Sea Museum. So next Tuesday we'll be able to follow up on that with Ryan and talk about some of these wonderful folks that they're going to bring in for the 2018 Savannah Music Festival. He's going to be the first part of the show. The second part is going to be quite nice. It's going to be a snippet of the Savannah Stage Company production. It's a Wonderful Life. We're going to move into holiday mode a little bit here. It's a Wonderful Life. They're doing that production as an old-fashioned radio play itself. Their own production of that will be. So we'll get a couple of brief snippets of that here ourselves. So that's going to be quite a treat. And then next Thursday, I've got Artistic Director and Conductor Peter Shannon of the Savannah Philharmonic, who's going to come in and give us a preview of the musical offering they've got coming up very soon here in Savannah. And then also we are going to have, after that, the second part of the show, we'll have some folks from the Flannery O'Connor Childhood Home and a little brief reading from Melanie Bowden Simone. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. Out of her new book. So that's going to be an excellent show next Thursday as well. So I do want to try and quickly let you know, remind you of some of the incredible things that are going on. First off, just let me note that as I did with Savannah Rising this morning in my musical offerings, I noted that, of course, Saturday is Veterans Day. So let me go ahead and jump to that on Veterans Day. Several things going on. Vietnam Veterans Monument at Emmett Park, Bay Street, 6 p.m. The Vietnam Veterans of America Savannah Chapter 671 will host a program to honor all veterans. Music at 6. Excuse me. Go to vvsav.com for more information about that. There's going to be a grand Veterans Day parade, 10 a.m., November 11th, downtown Savannah. Parade route, of course, there's going to be some road closures. You might want to check into that, but that's this Saturday as well. Also, I should say, however, that the Vietnam Veterans Monument in Emmett Park, Bay Street event is actually November 10th. So that would be Friday night at 6 p.m. Veterans Day Parade on Veterans Day, November 11th. And also November 11th, 10 a.m. at Living History at Fort Pulaski National Monument to commemorate Veterans Day. They're going to waive the entrance fees, so that's nice, on the 11th and the 12th. It'll be a special Living History weekend that will include historians from the 48th New York Volunteer Infantry Regiment recreating life inside Civil War-era Fort Pulaski. So that will be interesting as well. What else can I tell you about? There is always so much going on in this city, and I never have enough time to get to all of it. A couple of Veterans Day type cinema offerings. Tonight, 5:30, Blood Road, in honor of Veterans Day. Telluride Mountain Film hosts a special screening about two women's emotional journey, which is nice. You don't always get a female perspective regarding Veterans Day. This is a film called Blood Road. It's going to be at the Service Brewing Company. It's free for all veterans. However, it is not free for others. $15 on that thing. Also, the classic Cold War classic from Stanley Kubrick, Dr. Strangelove, is at 8 p.m. at the Trustees Theater. That is not a free event either, but quite an iconic film. Tomorrow night, Museum in the Moonlight at Ships of the Sea Museum, commemorating the Scarborough House's history as the West Broad Street School, which it was once upon a time. That's at 7 p.m. tomorrow night, Ships of the Sea Museum. Tomorrow night, I believe I have it correctly, that tomorrow night, Friday the 10th, is the opening of It's a Wonderful Life, a radio play at Space Station at Starlandia. So that holiday classic is going to be produced, and as I say, they're going to be my guest next week with a snippet of that for us as well. Coming up, there is, well, we mentioned the Living History Weekend at Fort Pulaski, and there's a lecture on Monday the 13th, Conservation and Restoration at the Owens Thomas House. That's 5:30 p.m. at Jepson Center, free and open to the public. There is also Monday Means Community. Can we just press pause? That's an Emergent Savannah event, a conversation about resilience, featuring Andy Wright of Savannah Law School, Paulina Bennett Martin of 100 Miles, someone from the Foundry Coffee Pub, Deep Center Youth Leadership Team. That's going to be 7 p.m. The Sentient Being, free and open to the public, Monday the 11th to 13. And also, as I'm trying to fumble around with all of my notes, I should let you know that even tonight at 5 o'clock at Sentient Being is the Savannah Responds to the Mass Shooting and Local Gun Violence at Sentient Being. So that is going on tonight, this evening, this late afternoon, 5 p.m. at Sentient Being. Goodness. Also on Saturday is the Victory Moto Show, 6 to 10 p.m. at Service Brewing. Now, the thing about this is there's going to be some rock music and some stuff, but the thing about it is a benefit for the Tiny House Project for homeless veterans. So Veterans Day connected as well, and I think the Tiny House Project, myself, I think, is an excellent, extraordinary, and very laudable effort that's going on to deal with those sorts of things. All right, guys, I guess I have run out of time. I can't stand it. I've got so much more I'd like to say. However, I will leave you with this. Remember to pledge. We are in our pledge drive here at WRUU. Any amount you can spare is fine, guys. You can go online, WRUU.org, and you can pay by check or credit card. and it is to keep this show running, to keep this whole station running. If you like what you hear on WRUU, consider a pledge, and as generous an amount as you can will be appreciated for us to keep on the air and keep the operating cost going. See you next week.
WRUU LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org.